Hola, hola a todos, todas, bienvenidos. My name is Irma Marquez Trapero, and I am the Executive Director of LatinoLEAD. I use she, her, ella pronouns. And I have the honor today of welcoming you to another one of our Elevate Inspire Latino Lead event series. And today is part 2 of our second annual Afro-Latinidad virtual event, which was started last year. And I am happy also to be welcoming back Yvette Modestin, who is the founder and executive director of Encuentro Diaspora Afro in Boston, Massachusetts. She is an activist. She was here with us last week and truly a truth teller and one of the top 30 most influential Afro-Latinas in the world. And so we're very just happy to have you back. Gracias otra vez, Yvette, por aceptar to a second part of today's conversation. And also we have our very own Latino Lead Network leaders, Clement Wilcox, who is Research Engagement and Specialist at the University of Minnesota, y también Edgar East, professional musician and educator from the Midwest. And thank you all, again, for being here and for sharing with us today and for pushing us beyond this conversation and into action. Our goal of this part 2 is really to dive deeper together about how we, center, rather exclude Blackness within the Latino community. And we want to hear from all of you also watching, about this. This is a conversation that includes all of us, and we want to make sure that we include your voice in that. So throughout the event, if you have comments, questions, thoughts, please do share them in the chat, and we'll make sure to, get to them if we can. And thank you. Así que anímense a participar. This is all of our work, as I mentioned. And without further ado, I'll have Yvette take it from here again. Thank you y bienvenida de nuevo a tu casa. Y qué rico tenerlos a todos ustedes today. So thank you so much.
Buenas tardes, saludos a todos. I was in my artistic light in my presentation earlier, so I'm going to sit in that for a bit and open up with some words, giving thanks to those whose shoulders we stand on. Holding white supremacy responsible for your blindness to see the beauty of your melanin when kissed by the sun. It shines, singing, shine, baby, shine. Holding white supremacy responsible for sitting in a chair with heat coming out your head, brushing your nappy so hard you cut yourself. Is white supremacy responsible for you not naming why they say Afro-Latina with such ease when they look at you? Negrura pura aquí. The darker the berry, the sweeter the juice turned into. Yeah, I don't want to be one of them. You're fighting for something every day. Yes, fighting against white supremacy. It shows up in all levels and forms, may take me off balance sometimes, may make the machete show up in each hand as I speak directly with the vibration of freedom, free the land, black power. White supremacy won't do is take away black rising. My down to the soul for that black king, my magic. Yeah, I said it. White supremacy will not take away my magic. The light is bright. Pause. Today we say stop the lie. I will not participate in any act that supports your lie. We are here, taking our space, bringing our chair, speaking our truth, standing clear in my identity. I am a black queen. Yes, you heard me, a black queen, shedding all that does not serve me. The only processes I'm doing is processing how to move with the deep soul confirmation that you will never see me. Your ears and eyes have been fed a lie. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm living my best life, holding space to be free, shedding every ugly, dehumanizing thing that you say about me. She didn't stop singing Strange Fruit. We won't stop saying Black Lives Matter. Las vidas negras importa. Love vibrates through these words, one with nature growing, expanding, and Breonna Taylor curls, Billie Holiday's flower, Angela Davis fro, Cicely Tyson's cornrows, Rita Marley's locks, our crowns, sweet sounding within, holding us up. We are here to tell you love resides here all the time. You dig? So, good afternoon, folks. Buenas tardes. You know, last week we grounded ourselves in a more historical, some of the history, the names, the countries. And today I just wanted to open and really hand the space over to Clement and Edgar, because they're the ones in Minnesota with Latino Lead. And I think their story is important to be heard and what we need to do, because I think the story plays itself out very differently in different parts of the country. So I want Edgar and Clement to really lead the conversation, and I will chime in. But what I'm hoping that this is an extension of sitting with a truth that may make you uncomfortable, but knowing that that discomfort is a light, a spirit, a fire that says it's time for change, it's time for movement, and sit through that discomfort and allow yourself to move forward and sit deeply in your African identity, your Afro-Latino identity, your Afro-Descendiente identity, because this is not just about some of us who don't have the option to say Afro-Latino today and not Afro-Latino tomorrow. I'm Black every day. And then there's some of you that don't get to say that every day because of however color your pigmentation came out, but at least to embrace your Afro-descendancy to Afro-descendencia. So I want to honor and gracias Irma, Camila, and the whole team for this wonderful experience, and hand it over to Clement and Edgar.
Well, in true Latin American fashion, ladies first.
Gracias, Edgar, y gracias, Yvette. Well, welcome everyone. We are super excited to be here with you. Thank you, Yvette. That was an awesome introduction. Blackness is such a different thing, an important thing, and I was Black in Colombia and I'm Black here. So a rainbow of stories and a rainbow of experiences. I am going just to introduce myself. I am Colombian. I was born in Colombia and I became an industrial engineer before I came to the United States. And I have been working in marketing and communications for quite some time in the United States. I came here to learn English, so forgive me if you don't understand something. I am still in the learning. Then I was living in Iowa, and recently, about 2 years ago, I moved to Minnesota because in Iowa it wasn't cold enough for me. Now, the reality is I moved here to work for the University of Minnesota, and I work for a research study named 10,000 Families. Edgar.
Gracias, muchas gracias. Y bienvenidos todos. Thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. My name is Ed East. Well, that's what they call me here in the Midwest, Ed. Edgar East. And I was born and raised in Panama City, Panama, amongst all of the usual suspects of sounds and traffic and all of the crazy stuff that any large city may have. Panama City is quite metropolitan. And I lived there for 18, 20 years almost until I came to the United States with a scholarship to study music. And in the process of studying music, I became a music educator, what some of you may consider a band director. And I have been teaching in the public school arena here in the Midwest, in Iowa specifically, for too many years to count right now. I've had plenty of experiences with elementary, middle school, high school, college, and many of my closest friends are college instructors. So I've had quite a bit of I've had my feet wet very well in the area of education here in the Midwest. Um, I'm going to say, first of all, one of the things that sticks out is that just like everyone else, I was black in Panama. I'm black here too, but there are some subtle variances, and I guess we will start, continuing the conversation and evolving the conversation as we go. But let us suffice to say that, culturally speaking, one of the first things that I noticed when I came to the Midwest had to do not with the color of my skin, but actually with the cultural background that I grew up in. When I came here in the college dorms, some of the college kids would knock on the door and say, "Hey, you want to go eat?" And I'd look at them and almost with a snicker, almost a sneer, like, "Yeah, right. No, thanks." And I would close the door, because in big cities you don't trust a lot of people, and no one comes up to you and offers something nice just like that. You're always a little bit leery. You're always a little bit, I'm not quite sure where this is going. But eventually, in time, I learned that the one in the wrong was me. I was the one who had this cultural baggage that I brought with me, and I had to let go of that because these people were really, actually, being nice. Fleming?
Well, we all have different experiences here. And for me, I bring my stuff from Colombia too. And one thing that surprised me when I arrived in the Midwest was to find my peers, my Colombians, my Latino friends, saying, "Oh, so are you surprised with the racism in the Midwest?" And I was like, surprised? Why? What do you mean? Well, this is so new for all of us. And I said, well, it's not new for me. And and I was very surprised to learn that a lot of Latinos thought that there were not race problems in Latin America. So in, that was different for me. I never thought of that. And maybe because I was at the receiving end of the situation. Um, but it was surprising for me just to learn that a lot of Latinos uh, didn't feel or didn't experience the racism problems in our lands. So it's very hard to convey information to someone who is still in the process to learn what was happening back home, uh, and then transform here.
I think, I want to jump in. I think that in thinking of what you both said, Edgar talked about culture, because Panama is the culture is very deeply mixed into our identity as Black people too, as people of African descent. It's part of the music, it's part of the food. There's no separation. And then you come here and that gets separated out. Everybody loves la salsa, todo el mundo gusta su arroz con pollo, su mangú y todo, but they don't associate it with Blackness or with African roots. They associate it with the country and the culture, versus en Panamá, todo está mezclado. En Colombia, todo está metido, porque Colombia también es mucho como Panamá. It's a part of everything, so there's no separation in it. And I too, when I came here for college, I was surprised to stand before people from Latin America and the Caribbean who were like, no hay racismo, but their behavior itself was racist. And especially from folks who come from predominantly Black spaces, like I said last week, outside of the continent, Nigeria, es Brazil, es Colombia, es Ecuador, es los Estados Unidos, es Santo Domingo, es Haiti. So to stand before people from those places, I'm like, what happened? But there's a denial, but class is also mixed into the conversation en Latinoamérica de una manera diferente que aquí. So you can be a Black person in Latin America and still, we're still always struggling, but like you know, I can only speak for Panama, Edgar and myself, like, but you can still advance. You can still study, you can still move, you can still grow, even within that racism. And then here, the racism blocks movement. It blocks everyone from hearing you or seeing you. One of the things that was very interesting to me when I came here for college was the perception that people have of Latin America and the Caribbean, or that word immigrant. People will be like, "Oh, do you need help reading that?" I'm like, "I already read it." You know, like, there's the perception was that we come from nothing, we know nothing, you know. So there was this constant sort of education of, no, that's not how it is. But that was the education you had to do with Americans, both white and African Americans, because they're not taught about us. So what I learned was people didn't know that we even existed, you know, because of the story that get told, and the visual that they get told does not look like any of the three of us. Um, so I think we need to make that clear, is that the racism is alive and kicking in Latin America, because we have a larger population of people of African descent, even than, you know, when you think about this country as a whole. Um, but we hide behind class, and we hide behind que somos mezclados, que somos mestizos, que somos todo esto. But at the end of the day, it still says anti-blackness and racism. You know? So I think um, some of the same behaviors that happens in our countries come with us here. And then we have to struggle in it with a different way, because race in this country is defined very clearly. It's black or white. And there's no room to say, oh, by the way, I'm mixed, or by the way, I come from this, or by the way, you know, you have to pick, you have to choose. And then some of us choose not to land in our rooted side. Especially if we can pass or we're lighter. It's like, no, let me stand over here, because you realize here in this country, to say you're black, to say you're proud to be black, to say you're proud to be an African descendant, to say you're proud to be Afro-descendiente, comes with a lot. And, you know, I would love to hear, like, what has that come with in the spaces that you sit in? You, Edgar, as an artist, and then Clement, you as an educator, like, where do you see that you have been put in that position that you're constantly having to defend yourself?
That's a very, very good question, and I want to preface the answer with a couple of things. You know, people are, if you're wondering, you know, when you see an Afro descendant that is also Latin American, you know, some people are still wondering how that happens because, you know, it's a mystery for some people. Well, it happens easily. My ancestors came from Barbados and came from Jamaica, even from Trinidad. The British islands over there. There were British protectorates at one point in time, and that's where English comes into the mix with all of us, even though we're in Latin America. So therefore, you end up with things like, you know, Panamanians who can speak English and Spanish fluently. Not a problem.
No
That,
surprise.
yeah, that in itself is impressive, because immediately that sets us aside from what this society considers as black. Here's an anecdote. I was teaching in a school that was predominantly minority students, children of color, very young children, elementary age. And after several meetings with these children, teaching them Latin American music and songs and dances and all of that, one little girl looks up to me and she says, "Are you black?" And I looked at her, and I understood exactly what she was saying. There's yet another layer that we're dealing with here, and that is that we may look like we are quote unquote black, but the word black doesn't have to do simply with the color. It has to do with an entire culture. It has to do with an entire mindset. It has to do with something completely. It's enormous. It's huge. It's big. And when people, and this is
Also le
So
cayó.
while
Go
while
ahead,
it,
Clement,
yeah,
hasta que Edgar regrese.
while Edgar returns, I usually, and I call myself a storyteller, so I am always, hey, he's back, let's finish.
No, I did. So,
Eso me pasó a mí también. So, no sé qué
sí,
pasó. ¿Qué está
yo me di
pasando?
cuenta
Sí,
que te fuiste y regresaste.
sí.
So, I'm sorry, and to finish with that, the idea of Black as a culture versus, I try to teach my students something. If you look at somebody, do not make assumptions because you really don't know. You have no clue. You'll see me walking down the street and you can make all sorts of assumptions about me. But when I open my mouth and I say, oye, muchacho, ¿qué estás haciendo? ¿Qué pasó? ¿Dónde vas? And you look at me like, wait a minute, you just destroyed my stereotypes. And I'm okay with that because I'm a stereotype destroyer. I want to make sure that people understand that there's diversity of all sorts. And just because I can speak English without too much of an accent, that doesn't make me anything, unique or special. That makes me me. And there are others who can do the same thing. And you will never know what their cultural background or their ethnic background, anything about them. There are people who have very, what we would call Asian features, who speak Spanish fluently, who teach Spanish fluently. There are people that come from other parts of the world who teach English fluently, and that's not their native language. They teach it. They not just speak it, they teach it. So there's a lot of layers that we still need to come to grips with that no, what you see is not what you get. And you just need to step back and ask yourself the question, wait a minute, what do I know? Do I really know? And the answer usually is no, I don't. So respectfully ask the questions that you need to ask so that you can learn about this person that you're seeing and not make assumptions. So how does it work with the arts? Fortunately, the music that I make usually is music from Latin America. Sometimes I do jazz. And when I do jazz, maybe people will put me in that box. You know what I mean? But the moment I start singing in Portuguese or Spanish, then all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, this guy is not the usual thing. He's something different. And then they start putting me in another box. And so that has helped define me as a not your cookie cutter definition. Plus, on top of that, once you bring the music to people like that and they start asking about your background, that all of a sudden that changes the game right there. As an artist, that's been an advantage in terms of educating people as to what it is to be a citizen of the world, what it is to be a citizen of the world that has African roots. I look this way, but that doesn't tell you the entire story. There's more to the story.
Thank you, Edgar. And then Clement, I want you to jump in, but I want to add to something that Edgar said is that, Panama is a prime example of Pan-Africanism. We are an example of what Pan-African looks like. I too am of Afro-Caribbean descent, of Martinique and Jamaica. So it's not unusual to run into someone from Panama that may not speak fluent Spanish because of the Caribbean influence and in Panama. But what is interesting is that we have this Latin American experience, and we were deeply rooted in our Panamanianness, right? But the Afro-Caribbeanness defines us too. It's the culture and the pride and the values come from that place. And then that place comes from a very African pride, a place. Yesterday was Bastille Day, and I come from French Caribbean family, and it was an all-day thing in Cologne, but it wasn't about the colonial piece. It was how deeply rooted this culture shaped Cologne, was a part of Cologne, So I think we play a unique role. That's why I say in the piece, that we played last week, part of it is like, let's not get caught up with the names, because Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, they could all be Panamanians if you understand the history of the region where many of us come with English colonized names. So Clement, what have you seen how does it show up in your work?
Well, I have to take my story from back home, back when I was in Colombia, and I believe it's a little bit different of maybe what you have shared about Panama. In Colombia, we have a little more strong divisions by race. Um, so we have it in our sayings, in our everyday life. You mentioned last week one of the sayings, Yvette, when people say you married someone who's lighter than you, like my case, and people say, oh, estás mejorando la raza. Are you improving your race? Um, we have sayings like, negro ni el teléfono, like I won't have any black in my house, not even my phone. So we have very, very strong divisions there. And recently I was conversing with my brother. My brother is an architect, and I was conversing with him, and he was mentioning that when he was going through school, one of his advisors, he told the advisor he wanted to be an architect, and he was told to, no, you should be a mechanic. You should repair cars. That's what you are made for. And then I realized that I was told the same. And through the years, we never have talked about this. So it was this realization that even though seems like we don't have strong problems in Latin America, we do. It's just we don't talk about them. That's a very important part of that. And moving here, I work for the University of Minnesota, but I am not a faculty member. I am part of the staff. And so my experience here is also, since I moved to the United States, how many industrial engineers look like me? Well, not many. Not a lot of women in STEM fields. Not a lot of women of color in STEM fields. Not a lot of engineers that come from Latin America, or at least that's what the perception is. So most times I have to prove myself over and over about what I know and what I can do. I consider myself a very smart person, but I have to demonstrate it. I have to prove it, because does a smart person look like me? So that those are the challenges that I learned how to live with when I was in Colombia. I was born in the coffee region of Colombia. And then when I moved here, getting to places where at a restaurant, someone would say, we don't serve people like you. Or going to the grocery store and be treated poorly and things thrown to me. And when I complained, the supervisor of the store said, we ask everyone for this. And I said, and do you scream at everyone that way? So those are stories that are everyday stories that when you get there, you have to prove yourself. You have to prove that not because you have an accent, you think with an accent, not because your title is from Colombia, it is like it was from Mango University, as I have been told. So a lot of times people assume that because we come from Latin America and we are not white, then those layers that Edgar was talking about become even harder for us, like bigger jumps. We have to reach higher things than your traditional mixed race Latino.
We become black. That's it.
Wow.
We become black. Period. That and that it goes back to what Edwin said. Like when the student says, "Oh, you're black," is it that black? When they say it in that way, it's not that it's gonna be easy. What that means is all the negativity that comes with it, you become that. Even if you come from somewhere else, I always say, we don't get to walk around and say, yo soy colombiana, yo soy panameña. I mean, here you walk and you're black. And then, it's we as Afro-Latinos become this bridge to break this idea that black is bad, because we Latinos become the safer blacks. And a lot of us fall for that. We become, no, nosotros no somos como los afroamericanos. No, you didn't know I wasn't Afro-Americano until I said I was from Panama. So you were treating me like, a black person. So we are in the position to push back on that idea that we are the better blacks, because we're not. We are equally to every black person walking in these streets. But we come with a different culture. And that's where the difference is. But, when I hear folks, I'm sure the three of us could say, how many times have we been in spaces donde la gente están hablando de nosotros y no saben que nosotros entendemos todo lo que están diciendo, and I wait for people to finish, and then I'll be like, sí, yo entendí todo lo que acaba de decir. It's like, so this idea of people not even seeing or thinking that, that we can't do that, or the fact that, as I said last week, in the after chat, is I'm not surprised when African Americans are surprised to see me or meet me, because they're not taught about us. So it's an educational moment. But I also, those African Americans that have taught about us because they have a Pan-African mindset. Also, I am not surprised that they don't want to deal with us, because we do have the Latinos that come here and talk about esa gente, and not include that nosotros somos esa misma gente cuando caminamos aquí. So we are in the position, Afro-Latinos are in the position to teach on both sides. We're in the position, we are the bridge. And when I founded Encuentro Diaspora Afro, it was, we are the bridge between the two communities that we stand very strongly with. We are the bridge to teach Latin Americans that blackness is there, Africanness is there, and we're also the bridge to having African Americans understand that even if we speak another language, that does not dilute, at least for me, that does not dilute that I am living a black experience. So I think those are some of the conversations that we need to push in the spaces that we are in. And the three of us have spoken. We live one foot in our home country and one foot here. There's no way. I mean, I don't know. For me, yo vivo con un pie adentro y un pie aquí, un pie en Panamá, because Panama defined my awareness, but also with everything that I have to go through here, Panama is where I really ground and remind myself what I come from, because in this country that is constantly being put to question.
So wonderful food for thought from everybody. I mean, this is, because we have these three different perspectives, all of a sudden, this is exploding all over the place. I'm sure a lot of people that are listening, their minds are blown right now. They're trying to figure out why is it so complicated? It used to be so easy, right?
Yes.
No, it's not that easy. I just wanted to say, a couple of things, from the background, a little bit of Panama in terms of, racism. I grew up in an environment, and I have to thank my parents and my extended family for never, ever having me feel inferior or different than anyone else. They did not, there was nothing, not a word, nothing ever was mentioned that made me feel like I was not equal to anyone else out on the street. Now, with that being said, we are observers of life around us. We pay attention to what's going on. And all of a sudden I started noticing things. I started noticing that if you had an accent and you couldn't speak Spanish with a neutral accent, some people started discriminating against you because you didn't speak Spanish very well. Right? In the schools, it was very blatant, and you could tell some of the teachers were very much aware of that, and they it's something you feel. You feel it. You don't necessarily hear it, but maybe you hear it, maybe you see it, but it's very subtle. It's there. In one of the conversations we had prior to this, I talked about my experience. The place I lived was kind of a dividing zone between those that had a little more and those that had a little less. I was kind of right in the middle of those that, more on the side of those that had a little less and the side that those that had a little more. But somehow I ended up having friends who lived on the other side, the people that had more. Don't ask how. I don't know how. We just ended up being friends, and we used to hang out. They had stuff I never had. They had motorcycles. I used to ride in the back of the motorcycles because I didn't have one, and my parents would not buy me one either. They said, "No, you're going to kill yourself." No. So theirs was not a financial concern. Theirs was a parental concern. No, I don't want you doing that. So I'm cool with that. I understand that. So we used to ride around. I used to go to their houses, and sometimes they would invite me to events, and I would walk into these events, and I would say to myself in a private conversation to them, who never heard the conversation, "Are you nuts? You're bringing me into this house where these people have all this money and they're all this expensive stuff all over the place. If something goes missing, they're going to probably point the finger at me. Right? Are you nuts? Aren't you thinking about this?" I never said that to them, but I was screaming that in my head. And with all of the intestinal fortitude that I could muster, I would walk around with them and watch myself. I didn't even want to go to the bathroom because then I would be alone, and that would be a moment of potential targeting. I didn't want to do that because internally I knew the narrative. I knew that some of these people had, in Panama, mind you, this is in Panama, that some of these people had stereotypes. And I wasn't going to be the one to erase it just because I walked in. They had no clue. So were there times in Panama where I felt the pressure of being the dark skin like this? Yeah, of course. An Afro-descendant? Yes.
Absolutely.
There were stores I would walk in and I would walk out because I said, nah, I don't even want to be in there. I can smell it. And sometimes even though I got the gumption to walk in and I wanted to look at some things, then I was followed everywhere I went. Not because they wanted to sell something to me, they were just watching. And you could tell because the mannerism, the talk, the way they talked to me, it was not the kind of interested sales talk that you would get from someone else that they would expect would have the means to purchase and whatever wouldn't fit the stereotype. So I just wanted to lay that out clearly that in Panama there is. I'm going to say there is because I don't think it's gone. The beautiful
I
thing
think
about
it's
Panama,
actually going backwards.
oh no, don't tell me that. I haven't been here
Oh,
for a
I
long
think
time.
no. I think it's going backwards. And then you triggered something that in Saint Panama does have racism.
Yeah.
And for many of us, for the Caribbean community, you had to deal with it from the Panama as a whole, with the Caribbean folks having English as their first language. Like my grandfather was French and then English and then Spanish, and what that meant like for that interaction. And then for those of us who were born and raised in the Canal Zone territory, the American territory, we had to deal with Jim Crow and segregated laws. I was the first group of students, generation of students that were integrated into white schools in this Canal Zone area. So, and that was so deeply rooted that I saw Black nurses, Black police officers, Black teachers, and everything every day of my life till I was 9 or 10 years old when we desegregated the areas and we moved. But and my parents worked with white Americans, but we didn't see them, we didn't live around them, we didn't play with them until they desegregated the area and desegregated the school. So Panama is deeply rooted in a racist history, and remember our ancestors, our Caribbean ancestors, from the Congo side, the original Africans of Panama, they were displaced because of the construction of the canal from the Palenque lands that existed in Panama. And then you have the Afro-Caribbean. After our ancestors, our grandparents, at least my grandfather, through the construction of the canal, remember el presidente de Panamá en ese tiempo, Arnulfo Arias, denied citizenship to the construction workers of the canal. And that was his way of saying, I don't want all these black folks staying in this country. So Panama is deeply rooted in a race, in also like Latin America, in a very racist history. But somewhere or the other, I think it plays out differently. For Panamanians are able to move versus, I think one of the things that Clement said is that, today, every day there's an Afro-Colombian or indigenous person killed in Colombia for doing the same thing that we're doing here, speaking their truth and telling their story.
Yeah, in what is sad about these stories is a lot of Latinos or people who call themselves Latinos don't know this history, so they assume it's not happening because it didn't happen to them. And when we move to the United States, where we become los hermanos Latinos, because as I always say to my friends, to the white American, we are just Latinos. You are not Panamanian, and I am not Colombian, and my friends from Hondurans are not Hondurans, and my friends from Mexico are not Mexicans, or they are Mexicans because all of us are Mexicans, for those who don't have the idea about geography in Latin America, not knowing that we are 20 countries, different cultures, different beauties, because we have a lot of beauty in our countries. But sadly, a lot of the Latino who didn't have those experiences in Latin America come here, for instance, to the Midwest. And if they are really pale light, they feel that they have more in common with the white population than with us. So a lot of times issues for the Latino population, they don't want to fight. They don't want to say, we need this for the Latinos, because they don't want to be seen like they are part of us. And so a lot of times they defend issues against the Latino population. You find your people against DACA and against people who come here undocumented, because they feel that I came here legally. What are those people doing? Well, we come here legally by accident because we had the fortune to have the documents here. But not everyone was born with that those benefits. Not everyone can do the same things. Some children were brought here because their parents wanted a better life for them. So it really touches my heart, and I get really, I'm sorry, a little passionate about it, because I feel there are a lot of Hispanics here who think they have to get on the side of the oppressor and in line with those issues, and forget that for the white American, it doesn't matter. We all are the same. And being with us and being true to what we are make us stronger. But separating ourselves from what we are make us weak. At least that's my opinion.
So we only have a few more minutes, and we, the clinician, spiritual person in me, it's like we started in the head, we really hit the heart, and we grounded ourselves in what we, in who we are and what we do and what we come from. Where's the joy? Edgar, where's your joy in the midst of this conversation? Where does your joy show up? Clemens, where does your joy show up? Where is that place where, with all of this noise that we are dealing with, where do you find that? Mira, yo soy panameño, yo soy artista, yo soy talentoso, yo soy talentosa, yo vengo de lo bueno, yo vengo de lo rico, lo bonito, lo barato, todo eso. Like, where do you find that? Recuerda ese comercial en Panamá.
Bueno, bonito y barato.
Bueno, bonito y barato. Where is that joy?
Well,
when does it show up?
Let's just say that as a musician, I teach something that's very close to my heart and has to do with the joy of music. Mm-hmm. I tell the story that, Africans did not come to this continent because they were on a pleasure cruise. They weren't here to visit and see things. They were brought against their will with nothing. Physically, absolutely nothing except for what they had in their minds and in their hearts. They could bring that. And they were able to bring that in the worst possible conditions. And under the worst possible conditions, when there's nothing that you can do and all you have is despair as a slave, what do you do? What do you have? Well, a lot of our ancestors turned to music and they sang together. And they found a way to overcome some of the most horrendous conditions that any human being would have to ever deal with. And music helped them do that. And I have a fantasy that right now, the music that we hear in our popular music, the music that makes us happy, if you trace it back, it came back from the African slaves. And I'm not talking about the African slaves in the United States. I'm talking about the African slaves everywhere. Because remember, some of our brothers and sisters don't know that there is a slavery history in South America and in Latin America. They don't know that. They don't know that we had the same situation, maybe sometimes worse, sometimes not so bad, but we have had that. And so I've had to teach even people who are Black that history happened and maybe started even sooner with us than with this situation here. So let me just say this. The music that was made was medicine that today you find it in the form of antidepressants and other things, but back then there was no access to that. So music was the only medicine. And that medicine was so strong that today the strength of that medicine still seeps through the music and it brings joy in ways that you don't understand. I can say this word and watch what happens. Salsa. Mm-hmm. I say salsa and people smile and people move and they dance. Why? It's a word. It describes a style of music. But that's how powerful it is. It's just a word. But when you know what that sounds like, your adrenaline rushes a little bit more. Everything kind of picks up a little bit. And you're like, yeah, salsa. I know. I like salsa. People say that. And they say with a big smile. There is the joy. The joy lives in the music that I make. Lives in the music that I hear in my head. Lives in the music that I heard when I was growing up. And some people have been able all over the world to pick up some of that and infuse it into their music, combine it with their music, and put some joy into their music as well. So where do I find my joy? Not just with the music, but with the smiles and the faces that are out there listening to it and enjoying it and not even knowing what's hitting them. And I have a feeling I know what's hitting them, but they don't know it. They just know it feels good. I'll stop there because we're running out of time. But you hit my passion button, and that's music and joy. And that's where I get my joy. I get my joy from educating people and from breaking their stereotypes, from watching them go, wait a minute, this guy's not what I thought.
That's wonderful. I wanted us to end on our joyous note.
Yeah, for me, every day that I open my eyes and I'm still in this world, it makes me happy. I'm a happy person just by nature. I like to meet people. I think that even though we have talked about a lot of things, I'm a very privileged person, a privileged Latina, and I like to share my blessings with others. So I like to be the voice for those that don't have a voice. I like to share and help those that need my help. And I like to have conversations like this. I like to teach people in my everyday about just stopping these stereotypes and just go deeper and get to meet people where they are and understand where they come from and be a positive in this world, not don't add to the negative part. That's probably what makes me happy, to help, to serve. That's what I do.
I don't know, Irma, Camila, if we want to come on and close out before we go into the fire chat. But Clement and Edgar, it was a pleasure sharing space with you. Um, you know, we are blessed people. We come from resiliency, we come from love, and we come from joy, and we come from righteousness and self-determination. And I think we are an example of that. That's why we are able to still rise up, you know, smile, be joyous, dance to our music, listen to that drum beat. You know, when that drum starts, it takes me right back. Something happens. So, you know, I thank you both for all that you're doing in Minnesota, and you know, I think there are spaces that are easier to navigate than others when the population is bigger, and then when the population is smaller, it stands out in a different way. So much admiration to the both of you for standing in that truth in the spaces that you're in Minnesota. So I don't know, Irma and Camila, si quieren, are you guys coming on? No sé cómo vamos a terminar esta parte. Aquí está.
So, I was just very much moved into what every single one of you was sharing. So just first and foremost, muchísimas gracias otra vez por hablar del corazón, por ser parte de esta conversación que es muy importante. Y es parte de nuestra comunidad. And so I just thank you all for speaking your truth in the way that is most authentic and powerful to you. And right now we are going to dive right into a more intimate conversation. We want to make sure, as we mentioned in the beginning, that we hear from you. This platform doesn't allow for us to see each other, so we wanted to make sure that, you know, as Latinos, we want to be, you know, virtual has been really hard on us. So this is a kind of a way for us to follow up in a more intimate way with you all present. And so you should receive, or you should have a separate Zoom link that will give you access to the fire chat section happening right after this. So for that, please bring in, you know, yourselves, comments, questions. It's an opportunity that will not be live because we want to make sure that we are speaking with each other and with the community. And so all of you are invited for that. And so thank you again for that. And so a los que puedan, please vengan al siguiente etapa de este evento. And I just want to, maybe the last few minutes, you know, we talked about joy, but what are we want to also invite folks to, you know, to some actioners or anything that, you know, comes to mind that you want to leave, you know, folks watching that might be, you know, helpful for us to continue to move forward. And then we'll quickly continue to jump into that right at 3 through Zoom.
I mean, for me, I think all the national conversations that are happening, that you should see yourselves in it. You know, we're having this major conversation around the critical race theory. That includes us. That is not just, you know, this sort of outside conversation or this African American to white conversation. Latinos fall into that critical race theory that we need to be really challenging and making sure that that history and that truth gets taught. So I think we need to start seeing ourselves and you know, when these conversations are presented and they're presented as just a black and white conversation, is that keep in mind that those of us who walk around black, who speak Spanish, are in that conversation also. So when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, that includes Black Latinos. When you're talking about the critical race theory, that includes Black Latinos. When you talk about the experience of Nicole Hannah-Jones and not getting tenureship and how she was treated in that university, that includes Black Latinas who are in these spaces also who don't get tenureship. So there's no separation in those conversations from some of us and all of us who walk in this world as Black people. So we are on the receiving end of all those things. When you talk about COVID and the impact of COVID in our communities, the higher rates of impact of people of COVID have been Latinos and people of African descent. That is us, you know. So don't wait for that visual to show up to say, oh, it's one of us. No, because it's not going to show up, because that's not what they present. And don't wait for someone to tell you that it has to do with Black, Latinos, or Latin America. Assume and take responsibility to be a part of the conversation, because it does include you.
Yeah, suffice it to say that many of the incidents that involved minorities being either brutalized or worse by law enforcement included Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
They look like us. They look Black, and that was all it took. The officers did not ask questions as to what's your background. Oh, so you're Latino. That means you're not Black. Okay, no, that didn't happen, and it won't happen because it's all about what you see.
In my case, I really want to invite Hispanic, Latinos, Afro-Latinos to begin to get into places where we have a voice, in politics, in committees, in boards, in every place where we can raise our voice. We cannot continue waiting for others to solve our problems. We have to solve the problems ourselves. We have the voice, we have the issues, we can speak from the heart. And so I want to invite you to participate, to not stay on the sidelines. Participate, bring your voice, bring your story, bring others, bring your family, be part of it. Don't stay on the side.
Tenemos, como dicen, tenemos que hacer mucha bulla, mucho ruido.
Sí. Sí.
Thank you again, Clement, Yvette, Edgar, for being part of this section of it, and I'm excited to be having all of us join the Fire Chat. If you have any questions, please do put them in the comments, and see you all in a little bit for a more intimate follow-up conversation. Muchísimas gracias.
Nos vemos.